All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Fire Chat Friday session. Very important session we have during Suicide Prevention Month. I want to talk about mental health, and so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. We'll get started here shortly, but just want to talk about a few admin things. We are recording this session, so if folks are unable to attend, this will be live for folks to review next week, and we'll be able to share that. Please, with this session, keep your camera off. That'll just be easier for the speakers to be up front and viewing for everyone. And then we'll have a Q&A session after all the sessions are, or all the speakers are done. But go ahead and put your messages, your questions in the chat box, and we'll get those answered during that Q&A session. With that, we're going to get started with Bodie Ronk from the NIFC office. Go ahead, Bodie.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Thank you for joining us. Bodie Ronk, I'm the Deputy Division Chief for Support Services for BLM Fire and Aviation. I wanted to start off by sharing with you all a little bit of the work we've been doing with some of the initiatives outlined in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, bill for short. A lot of stuff in bill. What most of you might appreciate is the extra money that you got in your paychecks from bill, but certainly some of the other things that we've appreciated from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is the emphasis on mental health and really allowing us to, I'd say, grab a gear and really kind of get things up and going, take some large strides together as kind of a fire community. So what we've been doing since the bill first came out, we've had lots and lots of interagency meetings with our DOI partners, as well as the Forest Service, and just talking about plans for implementation for some of the initiatives that are in there. The biggest piece, so Jennifer put specifically in the notes for this, what does it mean for BLM fire personnel? So what we think is one of the biggest deliverables for the field is the work we've been doing on a trauma services contract. And essentially what that is, our groups have identified a gap, and that gap really falls in line with after experiencing trauma or something similar from our profession, we struggle with having our employee assistance program meet the immediate needs after the incident. And so the work we've been focused on is finding a contract provider out there who's able to meet that need, who is familiar with you, who is familiar with the work you do, what your lives are like, and can really jump in and be effective with you, making progress, recovering from events that you may have gone through. So I think that's what we're most proud of. I know there's a lot of other stuff going on with bill as far as other agencies that don't have programs. They're starting to get some mental health programs up and going, and good stuff like that coming for our community as a whole. For us, though, focusing in on BLM Fire, so our mental health program, our CISM program, we've been doing some work now that we have Dr. Patricia O'Brien on board, and she's been working to develop a website, and that website is also going to be something for you. It's going to be a place housed on NIFC that you can go to and see all the great stuff that Patty's brought together and is going to have lined out on that website. Don't go searching for the website today because it's not done, but we are in the process of moving through that, and I promise you it'll be well advertised as soon as it's ready to hit go. So with that, that's about all of my high level updates, and I'll pass you on to the professionals that are here to speak with you. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Patricia O'Brien. Her bio is in the email that went out, but we're very lucky to have Patty on board with us. She's managing our mental health and critical incident stress program. So Patty.
Thank you. So yeah, as Bodie mentioned, this is an exciting time right now that there's so much support and interest in mental health. And I think, for me coming up through fire, there's a lot of change in the way that we talk about mental health, and just more acknowledgement of the need to take care of ourselves and to take care of other people, both just as humans, but also as people working in the fire service. We know that working in fire goes along with some common experiences that can be really stressful and really impactful just to lifestyle, to maintaining, good mental health, good physical health. And, historically, we haven't always talked about ways to stay afloat, especially over the long term. So I think this is really important. These changes are really important, and it's really exciting. This is also Suicide Prevention Month, as Jessica mentioned, and Jennifer mentioned, and it's important to just bring attention to that. I think it's important for us to all be aware of the issue of suicide, and then just more broadly about mental health. And I always think about that, the best suicide prevention programs and efforts that we can do are really in our everyday activities and the everyday actions we can take to support each other in the work environments we create, and being good friends and peers, and doing things that what we can to take care of our own needs and to take care of the people that work with us or for us. In the past, sometimes, I think a lot about the effort that we put towards maintaining physical health through PT, through all sorts of safety messaging. It's an interest that I've noticed a lot of fire folks have in maintaining good health and being physically fit and being ready for the challenges of fire, whatever that looks like in our work. We haven't always had the tools and resources to think that way and take, supported actions in that direction in the areas of mental health. What I really hope is that some of these changes will help to give us more tools and more traction to start to integrate those skills and resources that we really need to be able to do this work effectively and safely, and to perform better and stay healthy all around. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the resources that we have available to us. And some of these folks, I'm guessing, may have heard about, but it's always good to talk about, just review, and then also note some of the changes that are going on. And so one of the exciting things that's happened nationally is the 988 hotline. So this is a national change. Essentially, this is the introduction of a very short phone number, crisis line number, 988, that folks can dial, that replaces the old suicide prevention lifeline number, which is a 1-800 number. That number is still active. You can still call it, but having a short, easy to remember number that's accessible nationwide is a big step. This number also is a place for folks to call if they're worried about someone else. So it really is a super valuable resource. It opens up access to a lot of people. Ideally, and I think this is a work in progress, when folks call that number, they should be directed to a local crisis center. I think that depending on where you live, that may or may not, those resources may or may not be there yet. But that's an ongoing expansion regardless of that ongoing effort. If you call that number, you'll be connected with a crisis counselor. People often ask what happens when I call, what's going to happen, and essentially you'll be connected with a trained counselor, and that person will offer you, will listen, will offer resources that might be helpful, may connect you with resources locally that could be useful to you, may offer skills or things to try. And one of the concerns sometimes I've heard from folks is, you know, if I call, are they going to send someone to my house? Are they, especially now that, you know, we have a number like 988, is that the same as 911? It's not the same. It's a totally different number. The vast majority of calls do not involve direction to emergency personnel. The times when they would connect folks to those emergency resources is if there's an emergency, if there's an immediate risk to a person's safety or to another person's safety. So I think those are just important points to note. It's a really valuable resource. And like I said, you can also call for advice if you're worried about a coworker or someone else. And these services are free, available 24/7, and they're confidential. So big change nationally. Another resource that is available to DOI employees is EAP. And the EAP contracted provider is Aspire or ESPYR, ESPYR is the spelling. And one of the more recent changes to this program is that services through EAP are available to folks, and this includes seasonals, retirees, permanent employees, 6 months beyond essentially termination or a point when an employee leaves their position. This is also available to eligible family members. And this is important because it opens up access to folks who have recently retired, to our seasonal employees that may be, you know, navigating that transition to the off season and may not be attached to their communities. And we know that can be a tough time for people. And I think that the contact info is in the chat, is that right?
Yep, I think Jess is going to put the chat for information for 988 and then also attach the document for the new Aspire EAP information.
Great, yeah. So there you can access that program either online by calling the 1-800 number. I think there may even be some text resources available there. And one of the things that a lot of folks don't know, and I certainly didn't know for a long time, is that the EAP service also provides a whole bunch of other services that can be really helpful to people. There's on the website, if you enter the portal, there's a big list of different resources, including legal consultation, will planning, financial advice or supports. There's a nutrition,
fitness.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff available. Webinars. There are a lot of really great tools that that can be really useful to folks that I think are not super, they're not always well known. One of the big ones I've noticed is divorce support. And so that can be just super helpful to folks at those critical times. What else? I also just wanted to draw attention to the suicide prevention materials that were recently posted on the mental health subcommittee website. that went out during Suicide Prevention Week, which was around the first week of September. But there's some really useful materials that were designed to just kind of be short, easy to access, I don't know, chunks of information that could be used in a variety of formats. So at kind of tailgate safety discussions, or, you know, just integrated into other training, or just chats with your folks. You know, some of the information that's presented there is pretty straightforward, but you never know what can be really critical information to people. And I think also just having these conversations starts to chip away at that silence and stigma that we often have experienced, you know, not just within fire, but in life in general around mental health. So we know that being able to talk about these things, acknowledge them, and talk about mental health experiences as just part of health changes things. It changes the ways that people experience challenges. It encourages people to access support. It creates a community that hopefully is more supportive, or at a minimum, just creates more breathing room for people as they start to navigate getting help and recovery and accessing the things that they may need to get on track. I think those were kind of all the main points that I wanted to talk about today in terms of resources. Either of you or anyone have anything else to add that I missed?
No, I think that's great. I'm glad you captured on the other great things that Aspire has, especially on their website. I think those are typically underutilized or not even well known. So,
There's a question about when the contract would be available for the new services that you started off with.
yeah, so great question. So that contract is going to be managed by OWF, which is our Office of Wildland Fire. They are going to be the ones managing that contract. They have a goal out there of when to get it done, try and have it available, but there's not a specific date on it. All I know is that from our last meeting, it's in the works. They're assessing all the different opportunities, you know, what's critical in that, and you know what's critical in it, I guess, is the right thing without overdoing it, you know, knowing that EAP or Aspire, right, like there's a lot they do very well. There's just like a little niche group, which happens to be really fire and law enforcement, who just have a different need that's tough for them to meet for us. So, you know, it's not trying to come up with a whole new thing that duplicates everything there. It's just focusing on a particular niche type need that we've identified. Sorry, I don't have a date. Trust me, we're all looking for that date, and everybody's, you know, working hard to try and get it, but we don't quite have it yet.
I do want to add, I always want to make a pitch for getting help if you're struggling, especially with, you know, with whatever, with depression, with trauma. And if you need help accessing a referral to folks in the community through use of your own insurance or resources, we can also support that. There are a lot of really wonderful clinicians and services out there, and sometimes they can be hard to find, especially if you're new to the world of thinking about therapy or other support systems. We can also help with that. So I'll pass it off next to Paul Peterson. So Paul's the state FMO in Nevada.
All right, thanks, Patty. So we just finished our fall mental health closeout with all of our crews across Nevada. Had two teams hitting north and south. and talking about a lot of different things, namely time for reintegration with your family. And so, while everybody has been out on the lines, one of the things that we found is, an engine crew, operates a lot differently from hand crews and helitack crews as far as, what your reintegration look like. If you've been in Kingman, Arizona on an engine last month, you're probably pretty wet and you probably have a lot of reintegration already happening with your family. If you've been in burns and been on fire, that might look a lot different. But regardless, as we are going from this fast-paced type A type of lifestyle, at home, there's also people that are managing a home. And while you might be an IC or a Sawyer out on the line, there's also an IC at home. And a lot of times it doesn't work to come home and you try to be the IC also. Maybe you can be a swamper, maybe a Lee Pulaski at best. And so being able to have a little bit of humility and reintegrate with that family situation is important. Also maintaining and re-engaging those connections that you might have either lost over the course of the summer, as well as those connections that you have built with your crews throughout the fire season. And so both maintaining your current connections and re-engaging those ones that you might have slipped out of there. So I'm going to share one of the items that we put together. Dr. Steve was with us, and with his living ideation concepts, we put together this Call Your Shot. And so it's 7 questions. How do you describe yourself outside of wildland fire? And so if we are, that is our sole identity as a wildland firefighter, and really don't have much of an identity outside of wildland fire, that's probably something that we need to focus on, of how do you really engage yourself outside of wildland fire, and whether that's with your family, whether that's with the church, whether that is with woodworking, whether that is on a beach in Aruba. How do you describe yourself outside of wildland fire? Who are you going to spend time with this off season? Are you going to spend time with family? If you're on a hotshot crew, are you going to get on Southwest Airlines on the last day and find a vacation with the crew to Hawaii? Who are you going to spend time with? What will you be doing that's meaningful this off season? Having meaning and purpose in your life is critical. And during fire season, we find a lot of meaningful purpose fighting fire, being with crews. How do we engage that in the off season? And then what will I learn about this off season? We are on a never-ending learning journey. And so what can you focus on this off season? And these next 3 are really important questions to reflect back on yourself. How do you stay emotionally and physically healthy? How will you stay connected with your loved ones? And how will you stay connected with your fire family? And so I'd encourage people to take a picture of that. We will also be sharing this out with Patty and some of the mental health material. But as you are moving into either fall fuels work, or you're going to be laid off and traveling, or you're going to be laid off and searching for your winter job, make sure that you reintegrate with your family, maintain those connections, and reflect on those last 3 of how do you stay emotionally and physically healthy. So I'll turn it back to Jennifer.
All right, thank you, Paul. Yeah, great information to reintegrate yourself after the fire season, and a lot of good information from Dr. Patty O'Brien and Bodie on just the different resources, the different things to think about, and things that are needed in your life for the off season, or just in general, and the different resources that are available. A lot of these resources, like they said, we didn't know about, and we didn't know that was there. So please take the time to look at those links and share them with everyone. We will add these links to the email going out next week with the live recorded version. And if you always have any questions, like I said, Patty and those guys are available to answer any questions. With that, we do have time for questions. Please put them in the chat box. The first one we have is from Jean, I think Bodie was going to add a little bit more to what Jessica had mentioned in the chat. Go ahead, Bodie.
Yeah, just one thing to add to Jessica's piece there. Our efforts that we're working on, it is not associated with Aspire. So we're assessing different providers who would be able to compete for a contract to provide those trauma services. It's not, as it stands right now, it's not a contract. It's not changing anything with Aspire. We're looking at something standalone.
All right, next question is for Dr. Patty. Go ahead.
So the question is, how do you see us getting around the stigma of the term mental health and how people may perceive it and what it really means? So this is a good one. And I think that there are probably lots of answers to this question or lots of ways to approach it. But, you know, one thing that I think about is like our language carries a lot, right? So sometimes even when, you know, just saying the word mental health, which to me, you know, really has a meaning of like positive health, like good mental health. We often talk about the flip side of that as being mental illness, which also has a really heavy connotation sometimes. But, you know, to even to start talking about mental health and integrating that into our conversations, we start to change that tone. We start to change the meaning of the words, what the words mean to us. And that takes time. It takes repeated effort. It takes consistent effort. But ultimately, we're the ones who experience those tones, those undertones, and can help to change it. But, you know, essentially, I think that stigma has to do with shame, has to do with that the feeling that if someone knew that there would either be consequences to me or I would feel embarrassed. And though there's complicated reasons for that. It's like maybe part of fire culture, but I also think it's part of our world, the world we live in. And we're seeing change in that, you know, in fire and also in life in general. But I think that, you know, the antidote to that is starting to bring those pieces out of the darkness, to talk about them openly, to talk about experiences that really what we know are very common and to some extent expected when we go through certain circumstances. These are really, they're human experiences. Sometimes we think about going through, you know, having sort of positive mental health is just like our expected baseline. And then if we deviate from that, there must be something wrong with us. And we know that is unfortunately not the case at all. Our baseline is not just sort of staying in good health, both physical or mental, without proactive effort. And so I think as we start to get more, I guess, fluent in the language of mental health and start to integrate more skills and just make it more normal, part of our conversation about how we view physical health, mental health, I think some of those tones and undercurrents will start to change.
And Patty, if I could tie on to that, you know, I think the number one thing is talking about it, and talking about mental health, and talking about hard stuff, and talking about suicide, and talking about death, and talking about relationships. It is all there. You know, we have a choice on our physical fitness, and you could sit and just, you know, love your lazy boy all winter long and not have any physical fitness. You're still going to have mental fitness. Your brain is with you the entire time. And every single individual that's out there has stuff going on, whether you like it or not. And that mental part of it carries with us every single day. And being able to engage that and normalize that and have those conversations around that is the number one priority. And you don't need to be crazy to go see a counselor. You know, a therapist helps you work stuff out. I talked to mine this morning, and it gives you a different perspective outside of the continual loop that you're playing back and forth in your mind and over and over again. That's a benefit of you know, talking about stuff on a crew or your engine crew, or within your group of peers, you get that outside perspective. And that's what a therapist does. It breaks that cycle of that. You've got that song on repeat in your head.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Dr. Patty. We have the next one from Evan. Thank you for this great and necessary work. How many providers may become available through this new contract that is being worked on? Do we have any accurate data or other accounting to have a sense of the need that may be out there in our community, or is this a baseline effort? And we'll see what comes. Bodie?
Yeah, the number of providers, it's a loaded question, right? Because I mean, we can't just say there's X amount of firefighters, you know, each person gets this much, because there has to be like utilization to basically understand the scope of that. So that's a lot of the work that's ongoing with these groups is trying to right size that, you know, hit maybe a middle point and, you know, adjust as we're moving. It's kind of a middle target without knowing what true utilization is going to look like. And, you know, it's hard. Well, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thank you, Bodie. Any other questions from folks?
I guess I could also just add really quick, even though I think Patty and Bodie have also touched on this, but this is just the start to this effort. The fact that now we have specific funding allocated to this topic, that our elected officials are paying attention, that it's on their radar. This is going to be an ongoing effort for years and years. It's thankfully not going to go away. And thankfully now we have this attention, we have funding on this issue. So we're looking forward to more resources and to things like OWCP, looking at how to categorize mental health and trauma as a result of wildland firefighting and all these different issues that are swirling out there, and just the fact that people are really paying attention to this.
Thank you, Jessica, for that. Okay, we'll open it up for another couple minutes or so for any questions that folks have. But in the meantime, just Jessica did mention we have our Wildfire Matters podcast recording this afternoon, and Dr. Patty O'Brien is our guest speaker today. So she'll talk a little bit more about this, and we'll have that available next week as well. So you'll have two different resources to share with folks, as well as during wildfire or fire suicide. Oh my gosh, I have fire prevention on the mind. Suicide Awareness Week. They provided a lot of great content from the mental health subcommittee from NWCG, as well as BLM Fire sent out those two new posters updating some information and contact with the 988 number, and then some other links. Another one about burnout, just taking the time to yourself. So there's a lot of great resources that are out there today that people have that might not have been there 5 years ago. So just wanted to let folks know that we have a lot of resources. Thanks Sam for putting that link in the chat box. So we'll have that for next week, but just wanted to see if there's any other questions that we have from folks.
I have one. This is totally unscripted, so hopefully I'm not going to put you guys on the spot. So it's Graham Beatty from the director here. So I know sometimes there's a reluctance for people to admit to disabilities, thinking that their job might be in jeopardy if they admit to certain disabilities. Could you talk about the connection between mental health challenges and work capacity test and screening for suitability for employment? And I'm not trying to be provocative here, but I have a feeling sometimes people are a little reluctant to admit to having challenges because thinking, oh, maybe it won't allow me to get my helicopter or something like that if I have a mental health challenge. Is that something we can just open up just for a minute?
Sure. Do you want to kick us off with that?
Well, so
It's a loaded question.
I guess
It is complicated.
Taking Paul's
Yeah.
suggestion that we talk about this stuff openly, right?
Yeah, we do. It's so I mean, yeah, you know, there's, I guess in my head, what I'm thinking of is the HSQ, right?
Right.
And there are some questions on there. And if you mark a box on the HSQ, you know, then it flags you or something like that, and you have to get some other stuff. So, I mean, I guess like, That's what's complicated about it. I mean, it's not a problem, if it's marked on there that, one of the questions is anxiety. I mean, I don't know who doesn't have anxiety.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, somebody, might mark, have you experienced anxiety? You might mark yes, and, their HSQ gets flagged and then they have to, basically go through this process and say, oh, well, I just say you have anxiety. Do you need to go see somebody or something like that? So, you know, it's a complicated question. I think, I'm glad you asked the question, Grant, because I think you know
Are
this
you
is
sure
gonna
you're glad?
be a really hard thing to answer live in front of everybody, but I'm
Yeah.
glad you did, because we believe it's something we should talk more about. Patty's certainly been engaged with our medical standards program folks, talking about stuff like that, as well as our other DOI partner agencies also talking about the same thing. So I mean, it's, I don't know how to answer it, because, you know, I know people mark that box on there and then all of a sudden they're flagged, right? So,
Right.
you know, I don't want to tell people if you mark it, you're not going to get flagged, and then they get flagged, right? But do we agree with it on the HSQ like it is? No, we don't. It's being direct and
Yeah.
honest there. I think that's what you wanted.
Yeah, well, it's interesting what you mentioned about anxiety, because I know that recommendation is out there that everybody under the age of 65 and over 14 maybe should be screened for anxiety. The same way we're screened for anytime we go to a health professional now for suicidal thoughts, or, you know, which is great, obviously. And I think that's where we need to grow as well as a program and say, you know what, we're going to screen everybody for anxiety, like you say. You know, I think I was watching the Daily Show and they're saying, well, you know, everybody's anxious. If you're not, you're crazy, right?
Right.
So you better check that box. So,
Yeah.
using crazy in a layman's
I get it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, anyway.
No, I think like really what that process comes down to, I mean, I would assume it's well intentioned, that it's flagged to give somebody an opportunity to be like,
Yeah.
do you need help with something, or are you okay? Are you static and stable?
Right.
I think that was the original intent of that on there. But we believe we can do better in that area, I
Right.
think is the best way to sum it up.
Thank
So,
Yeah. Sorry.
do you have anything else to add to it?
Just that ultimately, you know, one, we know these are human experiences, depression, anxiety, trauma, that we are wired to experience to some degree. It's not to say that everyone does all the time, but it's part of a humanness, right? Like these are very common. We know from statistically that it's part of life in many circumstances. And what we ultimately want to do is help people get connected to get better, to get back to optimal performance. So, you know, there are like competing things there. Like we want to make sure people are, you know, safe on the fire line, but also, you know, don't want to in any way to increase stigma, to discourage someone from getting help or learning more about what might be going on for them, for fear that what might come out on those questionnaires. So it's like, it is, you know, there's tension between those things.
Especially if you're in a crunch, right? Like
Right.
if I gotta get my HSQ done, right? Like I'm trying to get the PAC test done by the scheduled date, and you know, everything like that, like marking yes on there could slow me up,
Yeah.
right? And yeah.
I at least want to take the opportunity to make the pitch that your health is what's most critical, and that you should not let the questionnaires get in the way of engaging with treatment, with learning more, with talking about it, with disclosing, you know, sharing that information in ways that you can get support. Because at least for my understanding, I'm still learning about it. What the intent of those is to really identify ways to support people and to identify, you know, like real safety issues. And for the vast majority of people, most of the time, I don't think that factor is gonna come into play.
We have a couple questions I want to answer. So one from Carrie Bilbao. Dr. Patty, you mentioned depression. Are there some simple things people can do to deal with depression or signs of recognizing yourself or others?
Oh man, this is a fantastic question, and depression is one of my favorite topics to talk about. But you know, we know that depression is a super common experience, and it's very, very treatable. And there are things that we can do, sort of self-management to take care of ourselves, and things we can do, you know, to engage with professionals that are really effective. So some of the things that I think are important to watch out for, some of the flags, I guess, in my mind, for depression is one, to notice that it shows up differently for different people, and maybe even shows up differently for the same person, differently across time. But some of the key things is the core parts of depression are just sort of loss of engagement, loss of joy, of connection, sort of flatness sometimes is what people talk about, or just feeling disconnected from life in a way that they didn't feel before. Not being able to connect with or enjoy things that they used to do, not feeling motivation to do those things in a way that lasts for you know, a few weeks or longer. We all have those ups and downs in life. Everybody goes through things like that, periods like that, but not returning to our kind of normal levels for ourselves. I say normal for ourselves is where it's important to start to pay attention. Other things that can show up are like changes in sleep, you know, feeling really sad or low, feeling numb, withdrawing. This is one of the things I hear most from people is like, I just don't feel like doing anything. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to go anywhere. Things feel really heavy. Even doing small things feel heavy. When that starts to stick around or impact the things that we have to do in life, the roles we fill, our relationships, work, school, whatever it is when we need to start to pay attention. And then of course, you know, on the more severe end, thoughts of suicide, having really intense emotions, sadness, anger, irritability, those are all can be parts of depression. So being able to pick up when those changes happen and start to notice, you know, I'm feeling a little bit differently, or this has been a really hard time, and connecting with the things that we know can help to like kind of lift us up. You know, before things get really hard, is part of that health maintenance, mental health maintenance. Some of those things are connecting with people, talking about it, problem solving. Sometimes, you know, even our ability to feel like we can problem solve gets kind of dampened down when we're really down. But to take those small steps, exercise, it has powerful biological impacts on mood and sleep. Sleep has a huge impact on depression. So, you know, I think for everybody, it's like there's a lot of work we can do to start to notice what our own signs are, to notice what makes us shift gears, even in small ways. And then often I think with depression, it comes down to like doing the things that we often least feel like doing at the time when we least feel like doing them. So it's like going to the gym, whatever it is, going for a hike, calling a friend, sometimes can feel like insurmountable when we're really down. But taking those daily steps is what fighting depression looks like. So, and then of course, connecting with therapists, connecting with even a primary care provider. There's a lot of really effective treatments for depression out there.
Thank you for that. And yeah, great question. Thanks, Carrie. We have another question from Darren. Our wildfire lifestyle is much to blame as anything for the negative mental health outcomes we see, substance abuse, divorce, rape, suicide. I'm curious if anyone is discussing the length of assignments, days off changes. In my opinion, we need to reconsider our standard tours of 14 days plus travel with 2 to 3 days R&R.
and I can share a little on that too,
Sure.
and then I'll let you, Grant, but, yeah, Darren, so, great question. There's probably a lot of people on this call that, disagree with that, right? Because, I was one that was of the opinion of, when this whole thing came out, like, yeah, we need, the more Mando days off, but, when you get out in the field visiting people and asking like the actual firefighters on the ground those questions, a lot of them want like that local freedom to be able to decide if they want the more time off or not, right? And so I think I believe that was one of our main reasons why we didn't go with the Mando 3 days off, is allowing people, local units, to make their own decision on what they wanted to do as far as days off, et cetera.
So, yeah, we heard that loud and clear, that one size fit all was not the right solution right at that time. This was last summer when it came up, when the Forest Service frankly came out and said, we're doing this in most places. And there was a request that we go along with a mandatory 14-3. So we had some challenges with out of region assignments versus local folks who maybe need different flexibilities. And then frankly, we wanted some science behind it. So I think before we made a pivot, it took us a long time to come to, well, folks have been around, remember 21-day assignments and 30-day assignments, how we used to do things, right? And so 14-2 was kind of a long, hard fought battle to kind of institutionalize that. And we didn't, from our side of things on the DOI, with all the DOI partners, we didn't want to go to 14-3, just kind of grabbing a number out of the sky, right? So what we did was we told people over and over again, you have the ability to either ask for days off or give your folks days off, to be flexible. And I don't think, frankly, 14-3 is appropriate for a lot of folks. I think 14-14 is appropriate for a lot of folks at given times, right? So everybody is different. I don't think we want to say that 3 is any magic number, but is more better than less. In a lot of cases it is, unless you're really trying to make money and you don't want to miss a roll with your crew. There were a lot of different things going on. So yes, we want to look at it. We want to be mindful that we're doing something that's based on some good science. And so we are engaging in a little bit of research to try to figure out what is a good number. Anybody who's been to Australia knows, 7-2 is more common there, or 5-2 sometimes, which is great. If you're a volunteer and you're kind of moving back and forth and you can go home, it gets to be a challenge to do a real short-term thing if you're traveling across GAC boundaries, and you end up traveling so much more than is really good for you on top of it. So there's some complexities, but I think overall we want to make sure that managers know and employees know that we can do more than 14-2, and we need to fit it to the individual need, and allow people time off to be human. I know Paul did some great stuff in Nevada about making sure that his folks got some breaks, and long-term breaks in the middle of summer when possible. And frankly, I'll just say this is why we're going for higher pay, longer tours, more permanent jobs, so that people don't have this economic driver driving them into work, because they can't make ends meet otherwise. And that is one of those key points. This is the mental health aspect of changing our workforce into a more permanent workforce with better off-season possibilities for employment, so that they can unplug more during the summertime. So frankly, that I think is the best thing that we're doing, to allow people to unplug because the economic drivers aren't there. So that's a long answer to that. Totally support people getting the time off they need and trying to make sure that it works for as many folks as possible, and do some science, do some research before we just pivot and mandate something that then isn't based in any good science.
Hey, Jennifer, if I could, hey, Jeff Farnberger, working fire ops at the base. And Grant just hit on it again. The NWCG's risk management committee is looking into this, trying to gather up science from both American, North American, European, Australian fire programs and militaries. There's some studies out there, just look at their different programs and actually trying to gather up some science. So there is a formal chartered group that's starting to look into this and trying to gather the data up, so that if we change something, we can do it based on data instead of just on the 10,000 opinions everybody may have. So just want to make sure I answered Darren's question. Yes, there is somebody working on it. So thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. And then Paul, if you wanted to kind of just talk briefly about kind of the things you did in Nevada, just that Grant brought up, just to give folks an example of what's happening.
So, obviously it depends on the assignment. If somebody goes from Elko to Winnemucca on a 14-day assignment, yeah, maybe that justifies off. Maybe if it's a 10-day, maybe it doesn't. It really depends. We have allowed that to be at that crew leader and FMO level, and we have encouraged our employees take 4, 5, 6 days off in the middle of summer and go to a wedding, go somewhere else, and catch up with the crew later. And so there's been all kinds of examples. A couple years ago, Vegas Valley took an entire week off in August. Silver State, took like 4 or 5 days off last year. And so, there's numerous people that we talked to over the course of this last week that, they went to a wedding or they went to a family event and took 4 days off and then catch back up with the crew, or they hop back on the engine, they hop back on the helicopter. And so, between their overall work and whether that's 2, 3, 4 days, it's up to them and their supervisor to really work that out, and maybe throw a couple annual days on top of that, or comp days, or whatever else. There's a lot of flexibility within that. There's a part of it where if you plan far enough ahead, that you could take 2 weeks off if you wanted to, and so we could provide that covered. But to short term, you just got to work to make sure that we still have resources covered, and it's planned with the district.
And getting back into that destigmatization concept, what we want to do is destigmatize that request for time off, to say, I need a break, I want a break, my family needs a break, whatever. It's like, we need to encourage that, we need to support that. And that's the piece that really has to happen, that at the crew boss level, at the FMO level, at the AFMO level, at the national office level, we need to have enough folks around that we can pick up the slack when folks need some time off. So that's why we need more folks and highly skilled folks, and everybody to understand that we need to take care of people's mental health as well as their physical health, their total health, right? But let's just call it health. And that means unplugging, for many people, not for everybody, but for many people. So we need to be open to it and actually support it, encourage it. So thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. We're going to get the one last question from Kent Slaughter. Any mention of mental health or medications for mental health management on the physical results and additional paperwork back and forth with CHS?
Kent, I'm not 100% sure I understand it. I mean, if there's a medication element in there, it's just if it's static and stable, it's good to go. And you'll have to clarify if I misunderstood your question.
Yeah, so just speaking from experience, even if it's static and stable, it still requires additional documentation from your doctor when you submit when the physical goes into CHS. So this was back to that. It wasn't a question, it was a comment. And it was back to Grant's question about bringing up mental health issues on the physical or on the health screen questionnaire. So it does require additional time. So it's an awareness when you were talking about going back to, the time crunch of got to get my physical or got to get my health screen questionnaire taken care of before do my PAC test so I can then go out and be certified. Just for people's awareness, it does take additional time, because then you'll need to have that documentation from your medical health provider that you are stable. Because if, even if you claim you're stable on the medication, they will still want it. Just like if it was any other thing that you're taking a regular medication for, whether it's, if you're a diabetic or you have some other medication you're on a regular basis. So that was what I was trying to get across to folks.
Thank you, Kent. Yeah, it makes a lot more sense when I read it as a statement.
Thanks, Ken, I appreciate that. All right, that is our last question we have in the chat box. Again, like we said, we'll send this information out with the recorded version next week, as well as a bunch of the links, some documents that we've discussed today. Thanks everyone for joining. Our next session is set for Friday, October 7th. We'll have Jesse Bender giving us an update on the complex incident management team and have a little bit more discussion on that. We have other topics throughout the month of October and November, and we'll send those out with an update. Again, thanks for joining. Have a wonderful Friday and a weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jennifer.